Okay, we should be live. How's everybody doing today? I see we have Tim here. Dennis is here. Jackie is here. Welcome, everybody. Oh, click refresh if you don't see us going live. I learned this last week. When the video goes live, sometimes you have to just click refresh if you don't see the video. All right, so who do we have here? Let's do the usual. Tell us where you're from if you're in the chat. It's always kind of fun to see. We're going through the Dynamic Slav introduction today. Brand new content, 10 lines on the Dynamic Slav ChessGoals repertoire. And these are lines to teach you guys just sort of at an entry level how our repertoire works. Okay, Jackie from St. Louis, welcome. Dennis from a few miles away, Rochester, Minnesota, welcome. Ben a few miles away in South Africa, welcome. Sheboygan, Wisconsin, welcome, Tim. I'm actually having trouble picturing where Sheboygan is. I should know. I'm looking it up. Oh, interesting. Okay. So, Tim, I've done the ferry from Manitowoc over to Ludington when I was a kid. We used to go camping in Ludington, had a lot of family in Michigan. Looks like you're fairly close to that, maybe hour south or something. Jorgen is saying Sweden, but in Phoenix right now. Welcome. Broward, capital of the U.S. Oh, wow. Malibu of the Midwest. Okay, here's a trivia question for you guys while we wait for a few more people to roll in. This was just at a trivia night that I was at. And the way it worked was, 40 minutes south. Okay. The way this trivia question worked is we had actually four different teams were tied for first in trivia. And each team had to bring one representative up onto the stage to answer a tiebreaker question. And it was whoever got the closest won. And this was for first place. And my team selected me because they thought with numbers that I would be the best shot, even though I'm not the best at trivia. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. Reluctantly. I don't want to be up on stage though. So I go up on stage and I was the fourth one up there, which should have been a huge advantage. Kind of like Price is Right, because it's whoever gets the closest to the numeric answer wins. So here was the question. I want to see what you guys put for the answer, but don't Google it. Just put your answer. During the average 7-game baseball World Series, how many pounds of hot dogs are consumed by fans at the game? That's the question. During the average 7-game baseball World Series, how many pounds of hot dogs are consumed by fans in attendance at the game? And I couldn't hear the first lady's answer. And then there were two guys after her, and I heard both of their answers. And while they were answering, I was just trying to do some quick math in my head to come up with my answer. Okay, Dennis is saying 350,000 pounds of hot dogs. DP Wrath is saying 100,000 pounds of hot dogs. And running through my mind was other questions like, oh, does that include the buns and the ketchup and the mustard? Even though I have no clue how much a hot dog weighs and how many people eat them. Had they asked like who's the best hot dog eating contest athlete, I would have known the answer, Joey Chestnut. How many hot dogs does Joey Chestnut eat in 10 minutes? off the top of my head, I could get pretty close. I think it's like 73 hot dogs in 10 minutes. I used to watch some of those competitions. But the number in a 7-game World Series was insane. Okay, so the first lady answered something in the 5,000s, but she was very exact. It was like 5,662. But I didn't hear her answer. The next guy said 500,000. And then the next guy said 1 million. And I was thinking it was somewhere like 25 to 50,000. So I just said 40,000. The answer was 7,000. It was surprisingly low. So that first lady was within like 1,500 hot dog or 1,500 pounds of the answer, which was just crazy. So we ended up getting second place and we got a $10 gift card to split amongst like 7 or 8 people on the team. All right, we're up to 13 people. I think it's time. We're getting ready to jump into the dynamic Slav. Were you guys all aware? Okay, here's one more question. Who's here to learn about the Slav and who's here to win a free course? Because we're going to give away a couple of free courses today. Sometimes we do that during the live streams. Good answer. Slav. Learn Slav. Good. Not about the free courses. Tim, already a lifetime member. Wayne says Slav. Oh, maybe we shouldn't even do free courses. Everyone just said Slav. Learn but free is excellent too. Good answer. All right, let's jump in. So the way we're going to do this is I'll go through a whole chapter. And then I'll pause briefly and just ask you guys, were there any questions on that chapter? And that way I can crop this later and put it into a free course. So there'll be a free Intro to the Dynamic Slav course. I still have to work on the Intro to the Caro free course. And it'll have like some quiz questions and the PGN files that you can download. So look forward to this being in a full free course in the future. All right. So the dynamic Slav has 2 goals. Number 1, it aims to pose difficult questions to white, and as part of that, playing for the initiative. So we have the black pieces, but we want to play actively and pose tough questions to our opponent, make them uncomfortable as a 1d4 player. And number 2, I want this repertoire to complement our Caro course. So those are the 2 main goals when I created the Dynamic Slav course. So that means when white starts d4, I need to figure out how do we apply pressure to white's position, but also work with the Caro. And this course also covers other first moves for white. So I have to think about c4, knight f3, and I think b3 is also covered in the course. You know, other first moves are covered. So anything essentially not e4 that you're likely to see. So after d4, I want to have something similar to the Caro where there's pawns on c6 and d5. So our repertoire recommends pawn to d5, move number 1, just immediately claiming this space in the center, going for the light square strategy. And after c4, we're going to play c6. This is called the Slav Defense. So we're reinforcing the pawn on d5. It's the exact same pawn setup that we have with the Caro. And if white were to start with c4 on move 1, we can start with c6. And then after d4, play d5. So we'll cover all those transpositions in the full course. Now the most common move is knight to c3. And we're going to play what's called the triangle variation. And this can lead to very strategic positions that are offbeat, and we're going to see a lot of different types of pawn structures and learn how to use those pawn structures to put the pressure on white. Now knight f3, and this is by far the most common first 4 moves that you're going to see. So once white plays d4, you go down a bunch of different branches. This is the most common position you're going to see on move 4, and you're going to see it quite a bit. Like you might see this exact position in a quarter of your games. It's that common. So what we're going to do here is we're going to play d takes c4. We already have an imbalance in the pawn structure, and that pawn on c4 is currently unprotected. this is the start of what's called the Noteboom variation. And the Noteboom is super exciting. It's dynamic. You have imbalances. You have one side gaining queenside space. That's us. You have the other side gaining central space. That's white. And you're going to see this position all the time. Pawn to e4 by white. Most common move. They build this big center, and they're looking to play bishop takes c4. And now we play b5. So we're creating this queenside pawn structure that's very solid. C pawn guards the b pawn. B pawn guards the other c pawn. But white's goal, if they know what they're doing, is they're going to try to chip away at that pawn structure, and they need to play quickly. If white just develops passively and lets us get developed, we're going to have the advantage already because we're up the pawn. So pawn to a4 by white. That's the immediate start of the attack on the queenside pawns. But now we play bishop to b4. So we develop a piece. It's our first minor piece coming out. This pins the knight on c3, and that helps protect our pawn on b5. So now that pawn's attacked once and defended once. A takes b, most common move. C takes b by us. And now bishop to d2 by white. So white breaks this pin on the knight, and now they are threatening to capture the pawn on b5. So this is where we play bishop takes c3. And this is a key exchange in the Noteboom variation. This is one to remember. So we're giving white the bishop pair. We're giving white the two bishops for our bishop and knight, but we're still up the one pawn. And the bishop on c3 is currently running into pawns. So it's not something where we're giving up the bishop pair and white has a big advantage. This position is balanced. It's approximately equal. So now we're playing knight to f6. Solid move, developing the last minor piece on the king side, preparing to castle, and we're playing that with the tempo. So our knight either wants to go to e4 or d5 in a lot of positions. And d5 is a super nice square because it hits c3, it hits b4, and it sort of helps with this queenside pawn expansion that we're going to go for eventually. So look for this knight to come over to the queen side in the future. Most common move here, slight mistake for white. And one thing that we're doing in this intro class is we're going with the most common moves for white, sort of at that advanced beginner into intermediate level. So the most common move for white here is e5, which is a small mistake, but black is already up about half a pawn here according to the computer. We already have an advantage. e5, slight mistake. And the reason it's a mistake is because we get to put this knight on the square that we really want him to go to. The knight lands on this beautiful d5 square. It's a powerful square. Look at all of these squares that it's highlighting. And also, this pawn on d4 is now a backward pawn, meaning there are no pawns next to it that can defend it. There's no e or c pawn that can defend this guy. So we can use that pawn as a target down the line. Okay, bishop a5 by white, most common move, defended by the rook and attacks the queen. Here we're going to play queen to d7. And the idea with queen to d7 is she's helping defend our potentially weak pawn on b5. So one of the best things that white can do in a lot of these positions is play b3. b3 highlights the potential weaknesses on these light squares, right? We see that bishop on f1 pointing at our pawn on b5. b3 could try to undermine those pawns. So queen d7 prepares for that. Bishop to e2 by white. Bishop to b7. This is the end of the first line. And our plan is we're going to play a6, castle, knight to c6. And we're going to have a clear advantage with the extra pawn, a safe king, well-placed pieces, and the eval here is a minus 1.6 already. So white's made very natural moves, and these are the most common moves that you're going to face at classical time controls on Lee chess, advanced beginner to intermediate level. And we already have a 1.6 advantage, 12 moves in. Okay, that's the end of line 1. Any questions on that first line before we go into line 2? And note that lines 2 and 3 are both Noteboom variation lines. I like that Spider-Man says, or Spider's Latin, nothing like making 1d4 players uncomfortable. When I was reading the notes, I actually thought you said nothing can make 1d4 players uncomfortable. And I was kind of laughing in my head. PK is saying, what happens if white does play 1b3? We will get into that. That's one of the lines coming up. All right, let's go to line number 2. Robert's saying, this is pretty good. Nice. Glad you like it so far. All right, line number 2. d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, e6, knight f3, d takes c, e4, b5. Now here we're going to see a3. a3, in a lot of openings, is a mistake by white if the goal of a3 is just to prevent b4. You'll find there's certain moves in chess openings, I should say, that tend to be beginner moves or inaccurate moves, and we're going to talk about a couple others in the rest of this course. If you see a3 in this position, it's way too passive for white. That is not in the spirit of the position. White should not give us a free pawn and then just play passively with a3. White needs to fight back, otherwise we get exactly what we want. So this is the second most common move in the position. So it's getting a line in this intro course. So let's see what to do. Knight to f6, just developing the knight again, preparing to castle. Bishop to g5, most common move. So instead of playing on the queen side here, white's looking to play on the king side and in the center. You know, a move like e5 is probably tempting here for white. So we play bishop e7, breaking the pin. Bishop e2. Now we castle. So our king is safe. We're up a pawn. And there's minimal compensation for white. The compensation for white right now is they have the big center. There's no bishop pair for white at the moment. It's just the big center. You could also argue that because our c pawns are doubled, that they're not as strong as they could be potentially. So instead of being up 1 point here, we're up about 0.6 according to the computer. And that 0.4 that we're missing is due to those factors. Strong white center, doubled c pawns for us. Castle by white, bishop to b7. So this is going to be the usual square for our bishop in the Noteboom. It's on the fianchetto square, cutting across the long diagonal. It looks a little strange because it runs into the c pawn, but if we were given a couple free moves here, what we're going to do is we're going to play a6, and eventually we'll play c5. And that's going to offer to trade one of our double pawns for white's strong d4 pawn, and it's going to open up that bishop on the long diagonal. So only temporarily is this bishop looking like a sad piece blocked by pawns. h3 by white, most common move. We're going to go a6. And now our queenside pawns are secure. White could play a4. It's actually the strongest move, but white's already played a3, so it's not likely. And the eval is about minus 0.9 there. And what we're going to do here is we're going to play c5, just like we mentioned, trade off the double pawn, and then we're going to try to convert this pawn up position. The nice thing about this line is we won the free pawn. White doesn't pose us any tough questions. It's a super common line for white. And we just have this big advantage 10 moves in. We're up minus 0.9 if white plays a4. And the next best moves, e5, queen d2, are around minus 1 or minus 1.1. So first two lines, 10 to 12 moves in, we're getting very clear advantages from the black side. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy when you see the Noteboom from white. And that's specifically this knight f3, knight c3, pawns on d4 and c4, because you get to play these fighting positions where you just grab the pawn, you hold on, and in all the lines that we're seeing, our king is pretty safe. So it's fairly easy to play, actually, especially if your opponent's not super booked up on what to do in the Noteboom. Okay, so that's line number 2. Let's pause for questions. And we have one Noteboom line remaining after this one. Okay, any questions? Spider is saying the best things about your opening courses is that the lines aren't too difficult to memorize or understand. Yeah, thank you. That's one of the goals. ChessGoals is all about data and efficiency and giving recommendations to adult improvers, especially busy adult improvers. So we don't want to give you guys 500 line opening courses and have you go 20 moves deep on every line. We look for some interesting sidelines and things that score well, and lines that you can just play based on plans and understanding, more so than I need to memorize all these specific moves 17 moves deep. So that's exactly what we try to do at ChessGoals. Aditya is saying, most of my opponents play the exchange. Will we be covering that today? Yes, we will. There's one line on the Slav exchange. And we have some, I think, exciting variations that we can play against it. Because people are usually afraid of the Slav exchange from the black side. Okay, line number 3. Same setup, triangle, take on c4. And now we're going to look at an early pawn to a4. And some of these lines can transpose. So here we want to play bishop to b4 first, pinning this knight. And note that this pawn on c4 is not being attacked currently. So that's why we don't need to try to play b5 right away. We're going to start with bishop to b4, pinning the knight. Now we'll look at e3. So e4 here can transpose into our other lines, but e3 is a new variation. So this is when white plays very solid and simply tries to win this pawn back. Now we play b5, hold the pawn, and we're denying white's plan of bishop takes c4. And the pin knight on c3 can't win this pawn back, right? So we're using tactics. We're using that pin on c3 to keep our queenside pawn safe. And after a takes b, c takes b, we reach a similar structure that we had before, except white's a little bit more solid here. And the benefit for white with playing e3 is that when we play knight f6, we're never threatening to win the pawn on e4. There's no pawn on e4. So that buys white just a little bit of extra time to try to win that pawn back on the queen side, which is what we're about to look at. Bishop to d2. Now knight takes b5 is threatened. White broke the pin. So here we capture the knight again. Bishop takes c3 back. And here white wants to play b3. With the bishop on f1, x-raying this pawn on b5, b3 is a way to chip away at our queenside pawn structure. So here we're going to play a5. So when you have this exact position, which is fairly common, especially at the higher levels, you'll find that white plays e3, b3 like this, and they try to win that pawn back. b3 by white. And we would love to play b4 right here. But this is one move that you do have to memorize. If you play b4 here, there's a problem. Bishop takes b4, and our a pawn is pinned, so we can't take back. So now we actually do need to give the pawn back. If we take on b3, white has bishop takes b5 check, and then they can win b3 back, and this pawn may die. So we start with bishop to b7. This defends our rook on a8. So now, after white takes on c4, b takes c4, we play pawn to b4. And there's no bishop takes b4 because we can simply capture back, and our rook is defended. So after b4, we get this very interesting position where we have connected passed pawns 11 moves in. How often do you see that in a chess opening? Connected passed pawns 11 moves in? That's crazy. So that's our advantage. The queen side is our advantage. We're threatening to promote those pawns eventually. The counter is that white has 2 big pawns in the center that we don't have. We don't have any pawns on the 5th rank. We don't have a D pawn, and we don't have a C pawn. So white gets this big space advantage in the center, and they still do have the bishop pair. But we have a dynamic position, no pawns locked up, and we have connected passed pawns. So we have 2 passed pawns, A and B. White only has 1 passed pawn, the C pawn. So it's a very interesting position. You'll get some wild games, and you don't have to memorize a lot of theory. There were just a couple moves there you have to be aware of, like the bishop takes b4, watch that pin, know when to play bishop to b4, pinning white's knight, and when to take on c3. But if you can navigate those few things, you're going to get these style of positions, which are really fun to play. Bishop to b2 by white. Knight f6, fighting for these light squares, getting ready to castle. bishop d3, we castle, white castles, and knight b to d7. Okay, so let's take stock in this position. Our king is safe. We want to play queen c7, rook f to b8, and push the queenside pawns. It's a pretty simple plan. And connected passed pawns as you go into the endgame become very dangerous for the opponent. So again, going back to kind of the whole point of this dynamic Slav repertoire, we want to make positions that are difficult for our opponent. If we flip the board, look at this position from the white point of view. White does not have d5 currently. It drops a pawn. e4 drops a pawn. And c5 gives black control of the d5 square. Right? Black is fighting for control of all of these light squares. And you see that these pawns are coming very quickly. So this position, it's actually forcing white to play actively and create some dynamic chances. Otherwise, we have the endgame advantage. So that's what I really like about this line. The other two lines, we just had big advantages. This one, it's close to equal. The computer may slightly favor white with the bishop pair in the big center, but white has to know how to pressure us. And if you look at the statistics in the databases, black is scoring better in the Noteboom, like all the way up to master level. And I think around master level, it's equal. And only when you get to the grandmaster level does white start to figure out how to create some small advantages. So it's difficult to play for white. Very interesting positions and not too hard to learn. So that's the third line on the Noteboom. Any questions on the Noteboom in general before we go to the next section? And we're going to be covering the Marshall Gambit, the Catalan, the Stonewall Dutch, the Slav Exchange, the London, and the Jobava London coming up. So if you have questions, is that line coming? That's sort of the outline for the next lines. Ryan's saying so awesome. Dr. PD Rath is asking about the Catalan. And Aditya was asking about the Exchange. Yep, we'll be covering that. Okay, we have 28 viewers. Let's actually pause here to do the first course giveaway. So we're going to give away some courses today. These are ChessGoals courses. Let me drop a link in the chat to find the courses. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in a question with a numeric answer. And we're going to see who gets closest for who wins the course. Okay, so the question is going to be, how many ChessGoals courses are there currently, paid and free courses included? So put your answers in the chat, and whoever gets it first wins. And if no one gets it exactly, it's whoever gets it the closest. How many ChessGoals courses are there currently if you add up the paid and the free courses? And I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so I'm counting them up right now. Drop your answers in the chat. It's kind of crazy looking back on how we've made the courses over time and how many we've ended up creating. It's fun to look back on. Okay, I have the answer. Let's see what's coming in here. 17, 32, 12, 35, 35, 42, 40, 40, 28, 36, 41, 40, 54. First course ever created was the Caro Kann. No one's actually hit it exactly, but we have a couple really close answers. Okay, let's stop there and go with the first closest answer, because it's about to be correct too. Ryan Thomas with the answer of 35. So the answer was 34. Ryan, you win with 35. Are you in the Discord server, Ryan? If you're in the Discord server, send me a message there with your course, because I'll need your email address too. Oh, Spider, I see you right after Ryan in the chat. You must have had it entered at almost the same time. Nice job, Ryan. All right, yep, send me that message. Which course, do you know which course you want, or do you still have to look at them? Alex is saying missed it. 36. Yeah, 36 is a good guess. And actually, before we created the Caro Kann course, on our old website, we had study plans that were paid products. So they weren't really courses, but that was how we initially launched ChessGoals as a business that could bring in some revenue. Ooh, nice. Could be the dynamic Slav even, or the CK, Caro Kann. All right, awesome. Yep, take a look and let me know. No rush. Okay, line number 4. Here we go. D4, D5, C4, C6, Knight C3, E6. We've seen this before. Our triangle set up. And now we have pawn to E4 for white. This, to me, is one of the best ways for white to play against our triangle setup. It's called the Marshall Gambit. I actually have no idea why it's called the Marshall Gambit, because white's really not gambiting a pawn here. They don't have to gambit a pawn, I should say. In some lines, they do gambit a pawn, though, and I think that might be why. But with the current position, no pawns are hanging. So what white's doing here is white's offering a pawn trade in the center, and they're building this huge center, playing aggressively and hoping to have the initiative, right? So notice how both bishops are already wide open. The knight's already developed to a strong central square. And at the moment, we're kind of sitting back here in this passive-looking position. So this is where we need to play active. If you want to avoid tactical lines, you probably don't want to play the triangle and allow the Marshall. Because if you get to this position and you want to avoid tactics, you have to play a move like bishop to b4, which is an okay move, but you're giving up about a half a pawn advantage already for white. So if you want sort of a bailout move, you can play bishop to b4 here and maybe just like hope your opponent doesn't play the Marshall. But if you go for this, you have to be ready for some tactics. So here we're recommending, sorry, wrong capture. D takes e4. So we accept the challenge, capture the pawn, and now we're going to try to challenge white's center next. And we're going to play very actively in the next few moves. Knight takes e4 back, and we jump out with bishop to b4 check. So developing with the tempo. Now, if white plays knight to c3, that's the way to hold on to the pawn for white. But the problem is we can play e5 or c5. And if white captures either of those pawns, we're eyeing the queen trade, which ruins castling for white. So that puts white into an uncomfortable endgame, which is sort of our goal, right? We want uncomfortable positions for white. So the most common and the best move here is bishop to d2. And I think this is where that gambit name comes into play. White is now giving up a pawn. So we play queen takes d4. We grab that pawn, and we're playing active here, attacking this knight on e4. Best move for white, bishop takes b4, so they win a piece. We take a piece back with check. But notice how this bishop is cutting off our king from castling. Their queen is sort of eyeing this d6 square. White's looking to target these weak dark squares around our king. And they have the bishop pair. So white does have a lot of compensation here for the pawn. And the computer says the position's about equal. It's balanced. Bishop to e2. And now we're going to play the grandmaster move. And I like this move because it's active, but it's also helping us get safe. We play knight a6, immediately threatening this bishop. So we're developing again with a tempo. Bishop back to c3, eyeing the g7 square. Now, this is a move that you do have to memorize because otherwise you can get into different positions that aren't part of the course. We're going to play pawn to f6. And I know Ben Feingold says never play f6, but here's the idea. f6 shuts down that bishop on the long diagonal. There's no bishop takes g7 pressure anymore. And the bishop on e2 runs into their own pawn on c4. So we're trying to take this bishop pair imbalance, this potential advantage that white could have long-term with the bishop pair, and we're trying to neutralize that. And our plan is to play pawn to e5, creating this nice pawn chain on the dark squares, and that allows us to put the bishop on the light square tucked behind those pawns. So whenever you have a bishop of one color tucked behind pawns of the other color, they work extremely well together because they control light and dark squares. So it's a nice harmonious position if we can get e5 and then tuck our bishop behind it eventually. Knight f3 by white. Here we played knight to e7, getting ready to castle. Castle, castle. Both kings are safe. We're up a pawn. The computer says the position is still balanced. And what we're going to do is just try to finish our development. We're going to play e5, bring this bishop out. Oftentimes we'll bring the knight back to c7 because white will be looking to probably expand on the queen side. And white needs to play actively here. They need to do a plan like pawn to b4, try to put some pressure on us. Otherwise, we're just up a pawn. And we're going to be able to convert this in the endgame. All right, so that's our Marshall Gambit line. Any questions on that line? Okay, PK is saying, what about LH5 check instead of knight f3? Okay, so that's after f6. Oh, the bishop is pinned, PK. So there is no bishop h5 check. I wasn't sure if L was bishop off the top of my head. I was thinking it was queen for a second. So that's Marshall Gambit. Okay, I don't see any questions, so now we can jump into the Catalan. Line number 5, Catalan. Here we go. Catalan is one of my favorite openings for white. So we have d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, e6, g3. So white's going for this positional setup in the Catalan. They want bishop g2, castle, and they want their comfortable Catalan position. So what we're going to see in both the Catalan and the London is when white plays those openings, they're very system-based openings. They want their standard moves. They want to play the same moves over and over and get their very comfortable games. And I can tell you as a Catalan player from the white side, the positions I prefer not to play are the ones where black tries to go for tactics right away and take my pawn on c4 or do something to disrupt the pawn center of d4 and c4. When black just plays extremely passively against the Catalan and plays, let's say, knight f6, bishop e7, castle, b6, bishop b7, knight bd7, and they just sit back and develop passively, that's by far my favorite Catalan position from the white side because I get everything I want with the nice space advantage. It's not a huge stockfish advantage, but I can just slowly add pressure in a low risk position. So what we're going to do from the black side is we're going to play the exact opposite of that. We're not going to give white a low risk position. We're going to make white work. So here we're playing d takes c4 already. Now, the reason the Catalan works in other positions is because the knight's on f6 and this pawn is back on c7. So when black takes on c4, there's always a quick way for white to win that pawn back if they want it. Queen a4 check, for example, can just immediately win the pawn back. So normally in the Catalan, you're never at risk of losing a pawn if you don't want to lose a pawn. Here, we're going to play d takes c4, and the problem is that bishop that should win the pawn back is already committed, and there's no queen a4 check because our pawn's on c6. We can always play b5, and boom, we're holding on to the pawn already. Bishop to g2 by white, pawn to b5, defending this pawn, preparing an eventual queenside expansion, and we're going to play for an advantage on the queenside. Castle by white. Bishop to b7. So we saw this in the Noteboom too. We put the bishop on the long diagonal, blocked by our own pawn temporarily, but the idea is our bishop challenges the fianchettoed bishop for white. We challenge that bishop on the long diagonal. That's white's strongest minor piece long term. Let's potentially offer to trade that piece off. A4, so white's fighting on the queen side, trying to win the pawn back. Moves like b3 and knight to e5, those can both be strong moves for white if we play too slowly. So a4 by white. We're going to go knight to d7. Our first goal in this line is going to be let's secure the queen side. And that's the biggest thing to remember in this line. Get this queen side very solid because you don't have to castle quickly. There's zero pressure against our king here. So it's going to be tempting to play knight f6, bishop e7, and castle. But if white knows what they're doing, they're going to apply pressure to the queen side. You want to focus on just solidify that side of the board first, and then get the king castled. A takes b5, c takes b5, knight to c3, targeting the pawn. And now we play a6. So we have this nice pawn chain. There's no knight takes b5, because our bishop guards our rook, so we can always take back. If you look at the computer here, we're already up minus 0.6. So we already have a nice advantage, 9 moves in. And now we're going to get our king to safety. Bishop to f4 by white. We play knight g to f6, 1 move closer to castling. And our plan is simple. Bishop e7, castle, and then expand with the queen side advantage. And we have a nice grip on the light squares. Our bishop cuts through here, our pawn guards d5, and our knight attacks e4 and d5. So already up to a minus 1.3 advantage now. We're following the most common moves for white. Classical time control, advanced beginner to intermediate level. Okay, I see Dr. Pediarath already has a couple questions. What if white plays solidly without g3, but queen c2, knight d7, preventing d takes c4? Well, so the question is, will white still be going for a Catalan? Right? So if you play queen c2, it's a little bit different type of position already. It's not exactly a Catalan. And I think we do have this covered in the main course. Another thing to note is we're going to look at the Stonewall Dutch. That's going to be our sort of default option. So if white throws us some crazy sidelines the first few moves in, or maybe I shouldn't say crazy, rare sidelines the first few moves in, we can always flip to the Stonewall Dutch, which is going to be pawn to f5. All right, perfect lead-in to the next line, the Stonewall Dutch. d4, d5, knight f3, e6. So here after knight f3, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to play pawn to e6 instead of pawn to c6. So when white plays c4, we're playing c6. But when white has the option of playing the London, which is d4, knight f3, and bishop f4, some combination of those moves, we're actually going to play e6 because we have a specific London line coming up that we'll see in the next line. Now after e3, this is sort of a solid setup for white. They're not looking to do anything too aggressive. Here we're going to play f5. And this is the Stonewall Dutch. These lines are really fun to play from the black side, in my opinion, and they can be very scary from the white side. When I've been a d4 player, well, I've been a d4 player for a long time. When I play d4, one of the lines that I've always struggled with until I started really diving deep into it from both colors, and now I like it for both sides, but I used to really struggle with the Stonewall Dutch from the white side. And the reason why is because you can make normal looking moves for white, and then before you know it, black has more space and a kingside attack, and you're sitting there thinking, what did I do wrong? Black's got everything in this position. So that's how it can feel sometimes from the white point of view. And we'll flip the board as we get down this line, just so you can see what it looks like from white's point of view. So our plan, we're going to play pawn to c6. That creates this Stonewall pawn formation, f5, e6, d5, c6. Kind of this zigzag, all pawns on light squares. The downside of this setup is the bishop on c8 runs into all those pawns, and it sort of leaves the dark squares open, right? White can try to work around the pawns and play on the dark squares. But the upside is it's super solid, and we're going to use this sort of V shape to launch a kingside attack. So we have a pawn chain pointing over to the king side. We're going to push these kingside pawns, and that white king is going to be sitting on g1. So we'll have the center closed up, right? There's no easy e4 by white. The c pawn trying to capture on d5 potentially. We're going to guard it with our c pawn. So we're trying to lock everything down in the middle and then launch the kingside attack against the white king. Bishop d3, c6, castle by white, knight d7. We develop the knight, and this guy is eventually coming over to the king side. Knight b to d2. Knight h6. This is what I call a ChessGoals wrinkle. We put these wrinkles into our ChessGoals courses looking for moves that are a little bit rare to throw our opponents off if they're memorizing specific move orders, and trying to get them into waters that they have to just understand the position and not memorize the specific moves. So knight h6 is a rare move, but it makes a lot of sense when you see why. The knight on h6 wants to head to f7. So we leave the f6 square potentially open for this knight or for our queen. And this knight heads to f7, which defends g5, right? Picture this knight on f6. There's no easy g5 for us because their knight guards g5. But also from f7, we have both knights attacking e5. So they can't easily do a knight to e5 hop. So again, this goes back to trying to make our opponents uncomfortable too. One of the plans for white eventually is to play knight e5 in a lot of lines. But we're going to try to prevent that if they don't go for it quickly. c4 by white, knight f7, and here we go. We're looking at g5, controlling e5 with our knights. C takes d, we're ready to meet it with c takes d. b3 by white, trying to get this bishop into the game. Bishop to d6 for us. We place the bishop on the best square, and g5 is just begging to be played here next. Bishop to b2, g5. The kingside pawn storm begins. You might be wondering, why do we just leave our king in the center and start pushing our pawns up the king side? You would never recommend that to a beginner brand new to chess. Well, the king is pretty safe on e8. We already talked about how there's no easy e4 break. We're ready to meet the pawn trade on the c file, and there's no entry points for white on the c file. That's why this works. Right? We're going all in on this kingside attack here because the center is all locked up and there's no queenside advantage for white. Right? The only advantage white's really going for here is to play rook c1, trade on c5, but they're not entering. And if their plan is to play c5, b4, p5, that's a really slow plan. And it could work potentially, but we're going to be launching our kingside attack at the same time. And it feels like our kingside attack is coming faster than white's queenside play with c5. Let me just plug it in. Yeah, c5, the engine doesn't like this move. I was just wondering that. That's about a 0.4 or 0.5 advantage for black. And in this position, it's about a 0.2 advantage for white. So the computer likes white slightly better here. c5 throws away that advantage and gives the advantage to black. Okay, so most common move, queen to e2. Now we play g4, dislodging this knight, and it has no advanced squares to safely go to. Our queen defends these squares, and our pieces defend e5. So white retreats. Now we play h5, continuing the kingside attack. Our plan is we're going to play h4 and then reinforce the forces over on the kingside. And there are many ways to do this, so it's hard to give specific moves, but here are a couple examples. You could play knight f6, knight h5. You could play queen f6. You could play queen g5. On the queen side, you're going to play bishop to d7 if this knight moves, rook c8, lock that down, but then you're going to push on the king side for your advantage. So that's the plan, and we have 10 lines just on the Stonewall Dutch in the main course. Any questions on the Stonewall Dutch? This is a super fun opening, and we have some bonus content on our YouTube channel with the Stonewall Dutch. Let me also drop a link to the main course. I saw someone ask that. There's the main course. And all of our courses do have a 30-day money-back guarantee. And the Slav course, I think, does have a couple full lines that you can preview for free, full chapters. So check it out if you'd like. The most popular courses for our opening courses are the Caro-Kann, the Slav, and 1e4 for white. Caro and Slav are 1 and 2. So Slav is our second most popular course, and it works really well with the Caro. Oh yes, thank you, Ryan. I meant to answer that. So your question was knight f6 on move 2. So if white plays c4, knight f6 is a bit of a mistake, because after c takes d, knight takes d, white can play e4, and we're losing a bit of time moving this knight around. So I'm not sure if you were asking after c4 for white, or if you were asking after knight to f3. But after knight f3, we're going to look at the London and see exactly why we go for e6 instead of knight f6 or c6. Hey, Louise, welcome. We've given away 1 course so far. We're going to be giving away probably 2 more courses. Let's do a course giveaway after the next line. Okay, if you're watching right now and you haven't clicked the like button, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. We're going to try to come out with a lot more of these live classes for sure. And then as I have time, which I should have more time coming up, we'll have more YouTube content that are not live classes. So currently we've mostly been doing live courses, live classes on YouTube. We're going to have more other YouTube content coming out. All right, let's go to the next line, and then we'll do the course giveaway number 2. Slav exchange. So white plays c takes d5. Move number 3, we take back with the c pawn. You don't want to take with the queen here. This gives white a big advantage. It's like a really bad Scandinavian defense almost, except white has 2 center pawns, e and d, instead of d and c, and they're going to be kicking our queen around. So you have to take back. Knight c3, most common move, and we do look at knight f3 in the main course as well, and we have some interesting lines there to fight for imbalances and play for the initiative. This line, knight c3, most common move, we're going to play e5. And if white isn't prepared for this, it can go south for them pretty quickly. That's what's fun about this line. D takes e5, best move, most common response as well. It's a temporary pawn sack for us, but now we play pawn to d4, kicking the knight on c4. And after the strongest and most common move, knight to e4, now we play queen to a5 check. So this is kind of like what we looked at in the Marshall Gambit line, right? Our queen's getting very active. We're kicking the white knight around, and we're making them play reactive. We're creating threats and making them react to the threats. We're playing for the initiative. Bishop to d2, queen takes e5. So we regain the pawn, hit the knight, they retreat, and now let's just take stock in the position. We have an advanced pawn on d4 compared to their pawn back on e2. We have an active queen compared to their passive queen. We have 2 bishops ready to go. They have one that's moved out to d2, so you could argue he's ready to go, but one that's sitting back on f1, no easy way for it to get out yet. The advantage for white currently is they have one knight out. They have another knight about to come out with a tempo. and we have a potentially weak pawn on d4. It's an isolated pawn. But that pawn, even though it's an isolated pawn, always has the option to trade for this e-pawn. Why is that? Because the bishop on f1 only has two ways it can get out, through the g2 square or through the e2 square. Well, g3 is probably not going to happen anytime soon, so white is almost forced to bring out the e-pawn in order to develop that bishop. So we can always play d takes e3, and if white plays e4, d takes e3 is en passant. So we can trade our d-pawn for their e-pawn. All those factors, the computer says 0.0. So it's a balanced position, but it's not a dry position. Okay, we're going to play knight f6, develop a piece, get closer to castling. Knight f3 with the tempo. And here we play queen d5. So our queen settles on this safe central square. And now, like we just talked about, white has to figure out, how do they get that last bishop into the game? There's no g3 for the fianchetto. And as soon as they push the e-pawn, we're going to play d takes e. So just for example, e4, we play d takes e. And now in this position, if white plays bishop takes e3, we have a small advantage. So this is where the fun comes in. White's trying to untangle. We're trying to make white be in an uncomfortable position. They have to find the move here, f takes e3, just to keep equality. Not very many people are going to play f takes e3. This move looks really ugly. It's an isolated pawn. It's blocking the bishop. There's no player that I can imagine that's not a grandmaster that's going to play f takes e3. It just doesn't seem good here. If bishop takes e3, bishop b4 check, they retreat. We have about a minus 0.15 advantage. So it's a tiny advantage, but we're playing the black pieces. We're 12 moves in, and we have something to play with, and we can play for the win. All right, so that's our Slav exchange line. We're playing that quick e5. We're looking to play active, and we're not letting white go down their standard plans. Okay, any questions? We're going to take a pause here, and we're going to do the course giveaway in just a minute. I need to think of a good question while you guys put questions in the chat. Okay, I have a good question. Hi, Harsha. Welcome. Cliff is saying, I played the Stonewall Dutch for a long time. Had issues when white fianchettos on g2 coupled with knights on e5 and d3 instead of knight to f3. Yep, and that's covered, Cliff, in the course. We do go over that. There's a line from Chessable. It's the Keep It Simple 1d4 course by Christoph. We have a couple really fun lines to play against that, where we try to take advantage of their move order. Yeah, in the current position, the computer does say trade bishops, and if they take with the queen, even trade queens. And after this, white has a small advantage. And I think the reason why is because their king is just a little bit slow to get developed. And if they castle queenside, there's just some very minor, I don't even want to say problems with that, but like the king is safer on the king side. So their king is just a little bit slower to get developed. Hey, Zelda, welcome. All right, Aditya is saying, looks very sharp. Okay, we're doing course giveaway number 2. Ryan, you can still guess, but we're going to give it, if you get it first, we're going to give it to someone else, since Ryan won the first one. Okay, here's the question. Everyone get ready in the chat. So it's a numeric question. Whoever gets the closest wins a course. And if there's a tie, it just comes down to whoever shows up first on my chat. So Spider just lost out on the last one, and it was probably less than a second apart from Ryan. So get ready. Okay, here's the question. What is this player's highest peak FIDE rating? Hikaru Nakamura. Classical FIDE peak rating. You can try to look it up, but it might be too slow. What is Hikaru Nakamura's FIDE peak classical rating? Okay, that's interesting. So the early guessers did not look it up. So the early guessers were 2650, 2750. Dennis 2814 was only 2 points off. That's a really good guess, Dennis, for not looking it up. The Toby 2820, 2763, 2780, 2865. And then two people looked it up right in a row. Enrique, I see with the first correct answer. And then Aditya right after had it as well. But it goes to Enrique. 2816. So Enrique got it. This is based on the 2700chess.com website. Okay, Enrique. Are you in the ChessGoals Discord? If you are, can you send me a message in there? Please let me know. Are you in the ChessGoals Discord server? If not, we'll have to drop a link. Actually, can you guys tell me, is there a Discord link in the description for this live class? Can you check that for me? Oh, you're not on Discord, Enrique? Okay. So can you send me an email, Enrique? It's matt@chessgoals.com. Okay, thanks, Zelda. Thanks, Jackie. Enrique, send me a message there. Let me know what course you want, and I'll help you get it added to your account. Yeah, Dennis, that was a really good guess. 2814. He already said no. Okay. Yeah, there's just like a slight delay. So I think you guys are probably 5 seconds behind what I see. Is that right? It's about a 5-second delay is what I'm trying to say. So I'll ask a question, and then I may ask the question again before you even respond to the first time, or before you see the first question. All right, here we go. Line number 8. We're going into the London, and we're going to look at a trick from the black point of view. So we're going to try to throw these London players off. We're not going to let them play their standard London setup. D4, D5, bishop F4, E6, move 2. If white plays knight F3, move 2, again, we're going to go with E6. We're going to go for the same setup. E3, bishop to D6. So look what we're doing here. We're immediately putting some pressure on white, making them think about bishop takes F4. Now, they could ignore this. It's perfectly fine to play knight F3 from the white point of view and allow the capture, and we go over this in the full course. But the most common move by quite a bit is bishop to G3. And we've had multiple ChessGoals students post lines with this trick working in their games. And it almost always involves white playing bishop to G3. Queen E7. And now here's the trick. We want to play bishop takes G3, white captures back, and then queen to B4 check, winning the pawn on B2. So we're highlighting the fact that this bishop came outside the pawn chain, B2 is undefended, and there's this potential check on the dark diagonal. So knight F3, most common move. And I would say most times white doesn't even see this coming. And sometimes when they see it coming, they'll play a move like pawn to A3, just trying to prevent it. They'll play a really slow move like that, which is fine with us. But usually white doesn't see it coming. So now we take on G3, H takes, and queen B4 check. Now I should note, it's not bad for white to go into this line. The computer says it's 0.0. So with best play, the position is still balanced. And that's because we're spending multiple moves with our queen to go get this pawn. And white's developing, right? So white's going to have full compensation for the pawn with best play. But again, what we're doing is we're trying to make white prove that compensation. So it's similar to the Noteboom where we grab that extra pawn. It's similar to that Catalan attempt line where we grab that extra pawn. We're putting pressure on white. We are making a London player play actively. We're trying to take a person that wants to play solid standard moves, and we're trying to shake it up and make them switch up their game plan. That's the whole point of this course. The whole repertoire is we're trying to make white uncomfortable. So we look at the computer evals, but we're more focused on what works in the databases, and white struggles in this line. It's an offbeat line, and that's why we're recommending it. So knight b to d2. Queen takes b2. And now we're going to go into simplification mode. We're already up the one pawn. And we're going to try to convert. Bishop to d3. Queen to a3. Safely retreating the queen. She's active, avoiding any tricks. Knight e5. And if white has the chance, white would like to play queen to g4, pressuring our g-pawn. They want to attack on the king side. The reason they want to attack on the king side is because they already have their rook here. The knight's posted up. The bishop points at h7. And we just have the knight over here on g8. All of our pieces are on the 8th rank. That's what we need to fix next. But we are up the pawn. So here we play knight f6. This guy is going to be our MVP of the king side. He's holding down the fort on the king side by himself right now. And it does look scary, but we have a solid king position if we keep him in the center for the moment. So we don't have to castle right away. Now our plan is we're going to play knight to d7, b6, bishop to b7, and then when it's safe, we're going to castle kingside and drop the queen back. But what you're going to find is if white doesn't put real quick pressure on you, you will be able to castle kingside in the next 4 or 5 moves. So it's on white to put the pressure on us. The eval here is minus 0.1. And thinking about it from the white point of view, if they were to castle kingside, which is normally a goal in the opening, they're essentially already losing most of their pressure against us. So they need to keep their king in the center, but they're also kind of waiting for us to castle kingside to get their attack. So if they keep their king in the center, then they can't attack us in the center. And as soon as they castle kingside, then we're going to be ready to castle kingside. So it's kind of this game of chicken, who puts their king to the g file first, who castles first. In this case, we will just wait to castle until white castles. So that's kind of the goal. And we're going to develop the queen side pieces while we wait for white to castle. Okay, I think the delay, that's the end of this line. I think the delay is bigger than 5 seconds. It's probably like 15 seconds. So if there are any questions, drop them in the chat and I'll wait for just a little bit to make sure they come in. I did see Ryan saying look scary while I was going over the line. G4 here. Yeah, G4 is a really common idea. In this exact position, the computer doesn't love it. And it's saying knight b to d7 is the response. And if you play g5, you can take. And after white takes, it likes knight to e4. So these pawns are potentially weak for white. And if white tries to win a pawn here, there's checks with queen to b4 check. So let's say bishop takes, d takes, knight takes, queen b4 check. Something like this. Black has a pretty big advantage. It's saying minus 0.8 because these pawns are weak. Yeah, minus 0.8 here. But g4 is a common idea. It's just not working tactically according to the computer. It says the strongest move is rook to b1, to which we should respond knight d7. And we're threatening to take this weakening white's pawns again. Best move, knight takes d7. And we can capture back with bishop if we want to give a pawn back, or knight if we want to allow potentially queen g4. Yeah, it's minus 0.3 still. So still an advantage for black, but white can put some pressure on here. And they should. If they don't, then we're up a pawn going into the endgame. So Ryan's saying many anti-London setups have c5 early. How would that work in this setup? So the reason we're not doing c5 early, it's because it's a little bit too common, and there are some lines where we play c6 early and then we don't get c5 in. So it's kind of a combo of those two factors. I think actually if you were to just say, hey, white's going to play the London, what's the most dynamic way to play against it? I wouldn't play d5. And I was actually thinking about that last night when I was going over some of these talking points. If the goal is just make a London player uncomfortable, I'm going for a c5 setup, and this pawn's going to end on d6. And I'm going to fiend kettle this bishop, fiend kettle this bishop, and I'm not going to give white any pawns locked up in the center. Right? I'm just going to try to target their center and play with really active pieces. And probably even this pawn goes to e5. Right? So we're going to have this sort of pawn chain, and we're not going to put a pawn on d5 at all. But I want this course to work with this Carol Khan repertoire. So that's why we're going for the light square pawn strategy first. Yeah, Cliff is saying as a Carol player, I prefer to play c5 against the London, then play c takes d, which transfers into a Carol exchange variation. Yeah, so you get that Carlsbad structure. Tim is saying c3 versus knight b to d2 for white. Attacking the queen. I'm not sure which position that is, Tim. Maybe put the full move order. Okay, let's go to the next line. It's one more London line. Line number 9, here we go. d4, d5, bishop f4, e6, knight f3, bishop d6. Here's our London setup. Now we're going to look at an attempt to kill the game. Sometimes London players just want to play a very boring game of chess. That's the goal of bishop takes d6. They're trying to just give us the bad bishop stuck on the same color as our pawns, simply trade off one of their good pieces, and they're looking to play boring chess. So you could play queen takes d6 here, but I think it's more interesting to take with the c pawn. And the idea is we're going to play for e5 eventually. So even though we have double pawns, this pawn defends the two dark squares, e5 and c5, and it gives us a half open c file. So we're creating this imbalance already on move number 4. Okay, e3 by white. Knight f6, getting ready to castle. Bishop d3. We castle. Everything is pretty calm in this line. So now what we're just doing is simply getting castled, right? It's not one of those lines where we have to focus on defend the queen side, defend our extra pawn. Everything is simple here. We're just going to castle and then play for e5. So here we go. Castle by white. Rook to e8. And we're preparing to make the drive position interesting. Looking at pawn to e5 next. Knight b to d2. e5. Now, white needs to be ready for e4. So white's doing their standard London thing, right? They're putting all their pieces on their favorite squares. Then all of a sudden we play e5. They may or may not be ready for that in advance, but now they have to face it. Pawn to e4 is coming, creating a fork. So they're going to capture. We capture back. Now keep in mind, we've followed the most common moves for white at the advanced beginner to intermediate level classical time control Lee chess games. We followed the most common moves for white. We're 9 moves in, and we have a minus 0.3 or minus 0.4 advantage. So white didn't do anything to disrupt our plan. We're able to simply castle, play e5, and have a big center. And the reason we have the advantage here is because we have this big center and there are no imbalances that favor white to give them compensation. So really it just boils down to that one factor. We just have more space in the center. And this actually looks like a position where we would have the white pieces, right? Usually white goes for this kind of 0.3, 0.4 edge where they just get that extra space and they have that to play with. Like that can be enough of an advantage to give you some hopes to play for the win and pressure black. But here it's kind of just like the colors are reversed. We were able to get this white space advantage with the black pieces. The best move here is pawn to e4. So white needs to fight back for the center. You know, if they play a move like c3, they're getting forked. If they play a move like bishop to e2, that's just super slow, right? And it gives us everything we want. And now e4 is not even playable. So the move white needs to play here is e4. And in this position, you can work around the e4 pawn. So we don't want to play d4 necessarily just because it fixes the center. You can build on the center. You can play knight to b7, knight to d7, for example, and this knight is going to c5, hitting their bishop, hitting e4. That's the strongest move. Queen c7 is an idea coming up. b6, bishop to b7. So we get that kind of nice slight edge with the extra space, and we can play for the win with the black pieces. And this is coming out of a London where white tried to kill the position early on with bishop takes d6. All right, so that's our last London line. Robert's saying he likes that anti-London line. Yeah, I like this one a lot too. And if you're playing someone, let's say you're playing someone that can research your lines. They know you're playing this bishop d6, queen e7 idea. You could still go for it. Or maybe you go for an earlier c5 line like Ryan was asking about, right? Maybe you just prepare a different London line. That's something I always recommend, especially if your rating's above about 1600, having multiple lines ready to go, right? So maybe you have this as your main weapon, but if someone knows you're going to play this and you don't want them to be able to kill the game and make it super dry, maybe you have a second option, right? Maybe you have a line where you go for a quick c5 and you just have d5 and c5 pawns. You don't play the early e6. That's definitely something you can do. Because a lot of times in the London, if you want to play actively, you're going to look for lines where you get something like this, and you can potentially bring your queen out. Like these are the kind of lines that can pressure white if you keep your e-pawn back. So that could be your plan B. You could go for a line like this, where you look to play actively with the queen and the pressure on d4, hitting b2. That's another good option. But the cool thing with the London is there are so many different setups black can do to try to put pressure on white. Spider has to go. Thanks for watching. Okay, any questions on the London before we go into the last line, which is the Jobava London? Just waiting a second, see if there are any questions. Okay, not seeing anything. One line left. Jobava London, also called the Chigorin variation. d4, d5, knight to c3, move number 2. This has been very trendy in the last, I would say, almost 10 years now. But people are playing these lines where you put the knight on c3, blocking the c-pawn. And back when I learned fundamentals of chess, after d4, d5, I've always been taught you don't want to put a knight in front of your c-pawn. And the reason for that is because you want the flexibility to play c4 or c3. And it's the same from the black side. And there is a Chigorin defense for the black side. When white plays c4 on move 2, and you put the knight on c6, knight on f6, blocking your own c-pawn from black side of you. But usually, you want to have the option of moving your c-pawn in a double queen pawn game. So knight to c3, you lose that positional option with the c-pawn, but you're looking to just play actively with your pieces. So that's the goal. A lot of times white will look to play e4, maybe with the help of the f-pawn. But white's not playing this because they're a beginner. They're playing this because they want to play the Jobava London. c6. And here, so we're not playing e6. Here, we're going to play against the b2 pawn like we've seen in other lines. So we know that a Jobava London player goes for this exact setup. We're going to try to make them uncomfortable. Queen to b6, move number 3, hitting the b2 pawn and the d4 pawn. That means there's no queen c1 because the d pawn drops. b3 by white. Now, this is the most popular move. Okay, so going back to the database, this is the most popular move. If you see this move, your opponent likely doesn't understand the potential weaknesses of playing b3, right? This is not a move that they would have prepared looking at any sort of computer or database of strong player games, but it's the most common move. And it's because they don't want to play rook b1 and they can't move their queen, but this opens up all the dark squares and it's going to lead to huge tactical problems coming up. And I'm showing you the most common moves for white. Knight f6. Okay, looks pretty simple, right? We're just developing, getting ready to castle. What's the London player move here? Pawn to e3. That's what London players like to play. That's how they get their light square bishop out. This is the most common move in the position. This is a big mistake, and it's only move 5. Now, if you want to try to guess the move, enter it in the chat, but I'm going to keep going. Pawn to e5. Pawn to e5 is a brilliant move, and the eval is almost -2 already. White is busted here. Bishop takes e5, so white gains a pawn. We go down a pawn, but we're about to win a piece. Bishop to b4. So we're pinning the knight, one attacker, and it has 0 defenders. And we're highlighting the weaknesses on these dark squares. Knight e2, 1 attacker, 1 defender. Queen a5, 2 attackers, 1 defender. Queen d3. Okay, so now we're at 2 attackers, 2 defenders, but we already put the knight on f6. So now we have knight to e4, and there it is. White cannot defend the knight on c3. So we're going to go a little deeper in this line because it's not 100% clear how we win the piece and then secure the piece. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that next. a3 by white, most common move. They attack the bishop, but the a pawn is currently pinned down, right? So a takes b3. White has to be aware that we're going to play queen takes a1 check. So here we can take. There's no a takes b3. White should not take back because we're going to take with the bishop, and that's a check when in the rook in the corner. But white also has to be aware that we're going to play knight takes e2 with the discovered check. And that's going to secure our extra piece. So white blocks the discovered check. And now it's kind of a strange position because we don't have one clear move here that just says like, hey, let's free the piece, right? We can't play, for example, knight e4 because white plays queen takes b4 back, right? There's not a clear way to get out of this. If this bishop moves, queen takes c3 wins the knight back. Okay, so what do? First, we're going to castle. Keeps the g pawn defended, gets our king to safety. We don't need to immediately secure the piece. So now let's see what happens if white tries to get castled and then win that piece back. So the most logical move here is g3. Now we can play knight a6. And there are multiple moves here that are all completely winning for black, but I'm giving you this move because I think it's the simplest. The reason this move is the simplest is knight a6 defends the bishop, And that means we're going to be able to free this knight, as we're about to see. Bishop to g2. Knight e4. Now we've secured the piece. There's no queen takes b4 anymore because our knight can take back. Right? We don't have to take back with the queen anymore. And there's no a takes b4 because the rook in the corner drops. So knight e4, piece is secured. The computer says we're up -5 here, so it's completely losing for white. And that's because we showed this g3, bishop to g2 plan by white, trying to get out of it. The best move here for white is actually queen c1, trying to defend the rook. But there's knight to b1 check, knight takes a3. So it's still a game with a little tactics, but we're +3 in material here, and the eval is around -2.6. So it's still completely winning. Okay, that's the 10th line. Any questions? I think, so we don't have a dog cam going right now, but my dog Memphis is barking at the delivery driver. Or he has a question. You have a Jobava question? No, he's just looking at me. No question, I guess. Yeah, FedEx. Even your dog likes this line. Nice. Memphis approved. Okay, I'm seeing, what about queen c1 instead of b3? Yeah, queen c1 here. I think I mentioned it briefly, but there is queen takes d4. So that's the problem. The queen had to guard d4 for white. Tim said nice. Ryan likes the line. The Toby F is saying, what about knight takes e2 as the last knight move? Yeah, that's this position. Yep, that's also good. Knight takes e2 works. Interestingly, the best line for white by quite a bit is to take b4, queen takes a1, and king takes e2. So it's kind of changing the dynamic to be a rook up, I guess, but our queen is sort of trapped for the moment. It's a weird position, but yeah, it's still completely winning for black. 4.5 point advantage. Harsha, I like your comment. Where were you guys when I had time for chess? I quit chess. When did you quit chess, Harsha? ChessGoals has been around since like 2018. Okay, I think I'm actually getting a package. Memphis is going nuts. Yeah, I like the knight on a6 too, Robert. It's just a real easy way to get that piece out. Double-edged, yeah. All right, we're 90 minutes in. That time flew by from my perspective. That was 10 lines on the dynamic Slav. Any other general chess questions? Yeah, knight a6 and white scratching their head. I agree. Harsha's saying, can I become a chess coach? I quit 5 years back, man. I think, honestly, anyone can become a chess coach. Like, once you have a little experience under your belt, even if your rating's not super high, you can still teach beginners how to play. Just teach at a level that you're comfortable with. There's a lot of people looking for help learning chess. Oh, that's a good question, Aditya. You're saying, what happens if bishop takes b8 instead of g3? So if white tries to eliminate that knight so we don't have the knight a6 idea, and then goes for this. Oh, okay, there's a tactical problem, I guess. Bishop to g4, and we're going to take the knight. So for white to try to round this piece up, they actually have to start with maybe f3. I'm just looking at the lines to see what looks cleanest for black. Rook to e8. Now if g3, oh wow, there's knight takes e2 here. Because the knight comes out this way. And the pawn is pinned. There's not a good way for white to get the piece back, but there's calculation required for us to just make sure no matter what white does that we are able to get out of it with the piece up. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for watching. We'll have to do another live class soon. I'll announce it over email and on Discord. With knight c2 in that last position. Yeah. Knight takes c2 threatened. Knight takes f3 threatened. Rook takes e3 threatened. So another pawn's dropping. White can't defend all three. What should we do for the next class? I don't have a topic ready. Thanks, Robert. That's awesome to hear. The thing I like about the live classes is I always prepare something in advance. So I can do off the cuff stuff. It's fine. But I really like having, a class that doesn't, I want to say waste your time. Like, I just want to have a class that's very condensed and like, here's exactly what I want you guys to know. And I like having it prepared in advance. So like a lot of the live classes we've done, it's practical endgames, and I have all the positions prepared, all the moves, all the notes. We had a converting the advantages class. We actually had 2 of those. Everything was prepared in advance. And I like the chat interaction too, like being able to answer the questions live. When was the last pawn play class? Oh, that's been a while. One course that I'm working on, but it's still, I would say like maybe 20% done only, is the intermediate planning and strategy course. So it's going to teach you how to evaluate positions, and it's going to teach you how to look at imbalances, pawn structures, pawn play, piece play. The idea is it's going to be a class for intermediates, course for intermediates, and it's going to sort of replace my recommendation of Reassess Your Chess. So Reassess Your Chess is the book that I tend to recommend for intermediates as a strategy guide. That's what I want this course to be. It's going to be all about strategy. Harsha, that's a great compliment. You're cool like Jerry Chess Network. Thanks. Robert saying candidate moves and avoiding blunders. Always a good class. Yeah, pawn play, pawn storms, pawn breaks. I agree, Tim. That'd be good. Enrique, could you make a course on theoretical endgames? Yes, I would like to do that. Actually, do you guys see? It's kind of hard to see with how my microphone's set up. Do you see those 3 books right here? Can you see those? The 3 books are 100 and actually there's 4 books. 100 endgames you must know, Dvorsky's Endgame Manual Fast Track, and Silman's Complete Endgame Course. The 4th book is Pump Up Your Rating by Axel Smith, sitting there. But one goal that I have is to take those 3 endgame courses, combine that with reviewing a bunch of games of actual players, actual students, and I want to come up with a list of the endgames that I think it's the most important that you know at each rating level. So I want to say, like, here are the beginner endgames that you have to know. Here are the advanced beginner. Here are the intermediate level 1. Here are the intermediate 2, advanced players, experts. And I know these books are already doing that, but I want to combine it with what I see in real games. So if there's an endgame that you don't ever face in a real game, I want to avoid teaching you that in the main course. Like, I want to keep it focused on what actually happens in games. So that's a plan down the pipeline. Because one thing that I've been doing, you've probably noticed if you're paying attention to which courses come out lately, I'm looking to do less opening courses. So I'll do some bonus content on our opening courses. We always keep adding that stuff over time. But I'm looking to give you guys less ChessGoals options for openings because we already have a lot of opening courses now. And now I'm trying to focus on what courses can I make that match up well with study plans and help with general improvement. Like, can I give you courses that are easy to digest in a good amount of time, not super large courses that it's like, okay, here's the efficient course on learning your practical endgames. In a lot of the recent courses, it's maybe hour and a half of video content. And it's nice bite-sized chunks. Like, here's 10-minute lessons with some quizzes, with some downloadable content, bonus content. And actually, that brings up a question. So we still have a pretty good audience. For the opening courses, what do you guys think? Currently, the opening courses tend to have about 100 lines and 10 chapters. So each chapter gets a video, and the videos are about 45 minutes on average. Put your answer in the chat. Would you rather have one 45-minute video per chapter or 10 5-minute videos per chapter? And the reason I ask this is because a lot of people are busy, and there's satisfaction in when you can complete something. It builds motivation. It keeps you focused. So it'd be the exact same video, but would you rather see a 45-minute, like here's your Slav exchange chapter, or would you rather see 10 videos where here's each line and they're 2 minutes to 8 minutes long? 10, 10, 145, both 10. Okay, so 3 votes for 10 lines, 1 vote for 1 line. 4 votes for 10 lines. 5 votes for, oh, wow. 10, Matt Jess. Does anyone else do this currently? Are there any other chess courses that have your videos all chopped up like that? Because what I could do, so for example, the Carol Khan course, I could have 10 videos per chapter, but then maybe there's like a link where if you want to go download the 45-minute video, you can separately. But the main course is we're going to split these all up. Oh, that's kind of what Jackie's saying in reverse. You could do a longer 45 with links to the 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, yeah, this could be a YouTube bias. That's a good point, TJ. The chat would say yes to 100 YouTube shorts if you offered it. Okay, or 100 4-second lines. Attention span these days, yeah. But I mean, I feel the same way. Like if let's say I'm doing an exercise on the treadmill and I just want to watch a video. Even if I'm really interested in a podcast YouTube video, if it says like an hour and a half and I'm spending 45 or 30 minutes on the treadmill, something feels bad about starting that because I know I'm not likely to watch it in a short enough time frame again to finish that 90-minute video. I'm much more likely to look for a 45-minute video I can click because I want to finish it. I don't want to just watch half a video and then hope to watch the rest later or be super interested but then have other things to do at the 45-minute mark. Thanks, Ryan. You might have already messaged me, but send me your class or the course that you want and I'll add it to your account. Enrique is saying 15 minutes per video would be good. So I guess how it would work is whatever the main line is would be longer because it's going to go probably 12 moves deep. And then the next lines would get a little bit shorter each one because they're kind of branching points. So there'd be some videos that are maybe 2-3 minutes. There could be some that are 10 minutes, maybe even up to 15 for the main line. but probably none would go 15 minutes if we did one per line. And I don't know if I could do it in a good way where it's like 3 lines per video. I mean, maybe I could like look at major branching points. You know, if a line's only 2 minutes, another line's 4 minutes, but they're kind of down the same main branch, maybe I make that a 6-minute video. That's not a bad idea. Okay, so here's a question. What's the optimal range for a video inside of a course? What would you guys say? Like min to max. How many minutes do you want a video to be? 5 to 10? Yeah, I don't think I would chop up a line. If a line was 12 minutes, I think I would just keep a 12-minute video in there. We have a Sicilian course. Right way. We have a whole Sicilian course. It's the Jobava dragon. Robert's saying 10 to 15-minute videos. TJ 30 to 60. So TJ likes the current videos. 10 to 15, 10 to 30, 1 per line. Okay, here's a question. If you have the Catalan course, because I would start with the Caro. We recorded that course as our original course, Jesse and I. And it's like using webcams and very basic mics and not the nicest overlay, but it still gets you all the content. And it's a really good course, I think. Should we re-record those videos or just chop up the current ones? Like there's kind of the nostalgic factor of like 2 guys, you know, sitting in their spare bedrooms, you know, just recording with laptops. Should we re-record them or just chop up the current? Because it'll be a lot of work to get it all spliced up. You can be honest. Don't re-record, just edit. Don't re-record either. So Matt Chess, in some of the courses, I have timestamps in our course player. So you can click and go to any section. And I think, no pun intended, I think Thinkific, which is our course player site, should save how far you got in that video. So you could just stop it at a new line, theoretically, and go back to it later, even on a different device, and it should jump you right to that point. But the question is, you know, I want to keep players motivated. Is it more motivating to complete a whole chapter? Also, if we split up the lines, we could have the quizzes intertwined, right? So you could do line number 4 of a chapter, and then boom, here's a quiz question right away. Answer this question on line number 4. Instead of waiting till the end of the chapter to ask all the questions. But yeah, that's one thing I want to do at a minimum for all the courses, but that does take some time too, is timestamp them all. Oh, I see. So if you wanted to just go back and look at one part of the video. Yeah, so I think if I were to do one chapter that had 10 videos, so 1 video per line, 10 chapters, I think what I would do, try to make it as easy as possible, is sort of put the notation in the chapter name. So I'd say like 5e3, you know, like here's the main branches. They played 5e3 and 6 bishop g5 or whatever it is. So that hopefully you could quickly find it that way. And then we'll have the PGN, so you could kind of go through it. Oh, that's another thing I'm excited about. Okay, so for the Caro-Kann on Lee Chess, there's multiple studies that you can view. There is the intro to the Caro-Kann Lichess study. And that's a public study. It's free. So that's like what we just went over today. There is a base Caro-Kann study. And that's if you want to just start a PGN from scratch and only add moves as you encounter them in games. This is like a very small, here's the main bases of all of our branches study. And then I'm creating a new study that's going to be sort of like our living document of the Caro-Kann, and it's going to keep expanding. So I'm going to go through our old content, and I always have a million ChessGoals ideas, so sometimes these things take time, and just bug me if you really want something, and the more people that bug me, the higher priority it gets. But it's going to keep expanding, where it's going to have links to content, like here, go check this out on YouTube, or here's some additional text. Someone submitted this game in Discord. I'm adding it to the living document. And that way we can just keep pointing back to the living document. And that one's going to be intended just for people that purchase the course, though. So I'm going to hope that it doesn't get cloned. But that's going to be something that just keeps adding as we get more ideas added to the course. So if it gets up to 200 lines, let's say, I might split up some of those chapters for the living document. Tim, are you asking about the intro to the Caro-Kann? Or intro to the dynamic Slav? Those are on Lichess. I think you can view them from my profile, Smarter Chess. I'll link it here. There's the intro to the dynamic Slav. And then that second one is the intro to the Caro. Ryan. What? But I do plan to put those into courses. The two intros, I want them to be courses that we recommend for players at the beginner level to get started on those openings. And then eventually, if they want to dive deeper, they can. Ryan's logging back in from the car. Well, drive safe, Ryan. Sorry, officer. I was watching a ChessGoals live stream. I wasn't paying attention. Probably not a valid excuse, but maybe a rare enough excuse that they would let you off the hook. Like, oh, what is ChessGoals? And they'd be like, I want to play chess. I want to learn chess. All right, we're pushing the 2-hour mark. I think we will wrap up there. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Come in the Discord server if you're not in there. Link down in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the like button. And message me anytime. Suggestions, questions. It's one of the best things about ChessGoals, honestly, is just helping people out and hearing positive feedback when things go well for them. So yeah, message me anytime. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.